All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get going here. I know there's somebody about to walk in, so I'll talk slowly so that I don't have to repeat too much. Good evening. My name is Paul Hughes. I'm the Regional Public Affairs Officer for the U.S. General Services Administration, and I'm your moderator for today's meeting. On behalf of the U.S. General Services Administration and our valued federal partner, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, thank you all for joining us here tonight for this public meeting on the new Land Port of Entry project at Highgate Springs. Tonight's meeting is an important part in the National Environmental Policy Act process for the proposed expansion and modernization of Highgate Springs. Tonight's meeting will begin with a presentation that provides an overview of the National Environmental Policy Act process and timeline, the proposed project, and the findings of the draft environmental assessment. Say that 3 times fast. Following the presentation, there will be a moderated session during which you will be able to provide comments. A couple housekeeping things. A stenographer is present to record all comments, and we do have a sign language interpreter up there if anyone needs one. As we move through the meeting, please remember that tonight is an important opportunity to provide GSA with input on issues that are important to you. Your input is a valuable and critical step in the process and will be used by GSA throughout the project. Tonight you will hear from GSA Project Manager Christina Clow and GSA's NEPA Contractor for Environmental Assessment, Leon Kolinkiewicz from Solve LLC. On behalf of GSA, thank you all again for being with us tonight. Our first presenter tonight is Leon from Solve. That's me. I'm all done. It's on you.
All right. This one is longer. It was the other day when you did it, Marshall. Thank you, Paul. The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, provides for the consideration of environmental issues in federal agency planning and decision-making. NEPA requires agencies to prepare a document to consider whether a proposed action may significantly impact the quality of the natural and human environment. In our case, the NEPA document is an EA. Within an EA, the agency, in this case GSA, must consider at least one action alternative and one no action alternative. The EA informs GSA decision makers and the public about the potential environmental impacts of implementing the proposed action, including whether to prepare an environmental impact statement or make a finding of no significant impact on the project. NEPA does not mandate any particular decision, but it does ensure that the public is engaged in the assessment and that GSA's decisions are appropriately informed. NEPA additionally requires the consideration of public input throughout the process. The draft EA public review period, which we are currently in, is an important opportunity for you to provide your comments on the project. GSA will consider your input during the decision-making process and development of the final EA. Your input will be included as part of the project record. GSA conducted public scoping between January 3rd, 2023 and February 17th, 2023, and held a public scoping meeting on January 12th, 2023. GSA used the information received during scoping to develop the draft EA. GSA analyzed the impacts from the proposed alternatives and documented these findings in the draft EA. The public comment period for the draft EA began on October 16, 2024. GSA posted announcements in the St. Albans Messenger, GSA website, social media platforms such as Facebook and X, sent emails and letters to stakeholders and interested parties, and broadcasted a public service announcement on October 16th to initiate the public comment period. The draft EA is available for public review through November 19th, 2024. GSA will consider all substantive comments in preparation of the final EA. The final EA will be published in early 2025. GSA will notify the public when the final EA is available for public review. At the same time, GSA will prepare the final decision document, which explains an agency's decision, describes the alternatives that were considered, and discusses plans for mitigation and monitoring of environmental effects if needed. Issuance of the final decision document signifies the end of the EA process. In addition to NEPA, federal agencies must also consider the effects of their actions on historic resources per the requirements of the National Historic Preservation Act. The process for identifying and assessing the effects of federal agencies' actions may have on historic properties is known as the Section 106 process. Early consideration of historic and cultural resources in project planning and full consultation with interested parties are key to effective compliance with Section 106. GSA is conducting Section 106 consultation with the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation concurrently with this draft EA. More information about this process, results from site surveys, and potential effects to cultural resources and historic properties will be discussed later in this presentation. I will now turn it over to Christina Clow, GSA's project manager for the proposed Highgate Springs LPOE project, to discuss the background, purpose, need, and alternatives.
Thank you, Leon. The Highgate Springs LPOE is located at the northern end of U.S. Interstate Highway 89, approximately 40 miles north of Burlington, across the international border from the Canadian port of entry at St. Armand-Philipsburg in Quebec. It is bounded by the U.S.-Canada border to the north, I-89 to the east, Vermont Agency of Transportation property to the south, and private property to the west. The LPOE operates 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, and processes private vehicles, buses, and commercial traffic. It is one of the busiest LPOEs in New England. There are 3 federal agency tenants at the LPOE: the Department of Homeland Security's CBP, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, the existing Highgate Springs LPOE no longer meets the need of GSA's tenant agencies. The Highgate Springs LPOE consists of 7 buildings located on 16 acres within the 20.1-acre property owned by GSA. The LPOE was constructed in 1997 and expanded in 2004 and 2005. The main port building houses a lobby for visitors, office spaces for employees, garage, interview rooms, and public restrooms. There are 5 inspection lanes for private vehicles to the west of the building, one of which is a nexus lane. There is an attached single bus inspection lane on the east side of the building. The commercial inspection building houses offices, storage spaces, and a cargo storage area. This building has an inspection booth for processing commercial vehicles. The garage connects to an external loading dock where commercial vehicles requiring secondary inspection are processed. A helipad is located just south of the building. The APHIS inspection facility typically processes livestock coming through the commercial inspection area. The wastewater treatment building currently functions as storage space. The hazmat inspection canopy is used to contain hazardous materials such as fuel oil that may be leaking from trucks or other vehicles. The non-intrusive inspection / vehicle and cargo inspection system building was constructed in 2004 and consists of a garage where non-intrusive inspections are performed on commercial vehicles. The FDA building was constructed in 2005 and serves as an office, laboratory, and storage space for FDA and CBP employees. The purpose of the proposed project is to expand and modernize the Highgate Springs LPOE to support the mission of GSA's tenant agencies. Accomplishing Accomplishing this purpose would improve and enhance the performance, safety, security, and efficiency of operations for cross-border travelers and federal agencies at the LPOE. More specifically, the project's goals are to increase vehicle inspection processing capacities and to accommodate current and future operations of CBP, FDA, and APHIS. The need for the proposed project is twofold. First is the need to increase the LPOE's capacity due to increased demand. The Canadian government is building the final 8.3-mile segment of Autoroute 35, or A35, which is a major traffic route that currently runs from Montreal, Canada, and ends 8.3 miles short of the US-Canada border, north of the Highgate Springs LPOE. This A35 project, when completed, is expected to increase the traffic at the Highgate Springs LPOE by about 30%. The LPOE does not currently have the ability to accommodate this projected traffic increase. Second is the need to facilitate and accommodate the changing operations of CBP, FDA, and APHIS. Studies have identified several issues with the functions and operations of the LPOE, some of which include the deteriorating conditions of the buildings and infrastructure, inadequate vehicle queuing and processing infrastructure, inadequate vehicle queuing, and a lack of dedicated training facility with a firing range for CBP officials. The project would ensure that adequate facility and infrastructure resources are available for the tenant agencies to fulfill their functions and operations. GSA identified one action alternative, the proposed action, that meets the proposed project's purpose and need. Under the proposed action, GSA would acquire a 57-acre private property to the west of the LPOE and up to 4 acres of the state property to the south of the LPOE. The structures on the LPOE and acquired properties would be demolished. There would be substantial earthwork and site preparation activities, including vegetation, clearing, excavation, and grading. 3 new buildings would be constructed: the main building, commercial building, and training building. The main building would house CBP and include inspection booths for private vehicles and buses and secondary inspection spaces. The commercial building would inspect commercial vehicles and accommodate a bypass lane for larger vehicles. The training building would house an indoor firing range and would be located off a service road outside of the main LPOE footprint. GSA also analyzed a no-action alternative, which evaluates the effects if GSA continued to operate the LPOE under current conditions, i.e. the status quo. No land acquisition, demolition, or construction would occur, and minor repairs and alterations, routine maintenance, and operations of the existing LPOE would continue. The no-action alternative would not meet the purpose and need of the proposed project. As stated earlier, GSA's proposed action is to expand and modernize the Highgate Springs LPOE. The new port would operate 7 inspection lanes for private vehicles, 2 lanes for buses, 2 lanes for commercial vehicles, and 1 bypass lane for larger vehicles. Additional supporting facilities would include employee and visitor pedestrian paths, rejection routes for vehicles returning to Canada, new utility connections, monitoring wells, a helipad, adequate snow storage locations, and up to 200 employee parking spaces. Through integrative design and application of sustainable design principles, the new LPOE would achieve at minimum a LEED version 4 gold rating and would comply with the guiding principles for sustainable federal buildings. Construction would tentatively begin in 2025 and conclude in 2028. The LPOE would be fully operational during this time. So the next slide, this figure shows the project area for the proposed action. The project area, shown as the red boundary, includes the existing LPOE, a portion of the private property to the west, and a portion of the state property to the south. The project area consists of approximately 50 acres, of which around 34 acres would be permanently disturbed from the new LPOE. Of these 34 acres, 23 acres are previously disturbed, and 11 acres of vegetation would be newly and permanently removed. It is anticipated that 16 acres would be temporarily disturbed from staging of construction materials and equipment. To the extent possible, construction personnel would make use of already disturbed land for staging purposes. I will now turn it back to Leon from Solve Team for a discussion of how each alternative could impact the natural and human environment.
Thanks, Christina. The draft DA evaluated 12 resource areas that were likely to be impacted by the proposed project: land use, geology, topography, and soils, water resources, biological resources, utilities, solid and hazardous waste and materials, traffic and transportation, noise, climate change, cultural resources, socioeconomics, and environmental justice. For each resource area evaluated in the draft DA, analysis is split into two main sections: the quote affected environment, unquote, and the quote environmental consequences, unquote. The affected environment analysis includes a description of existing conditions. Resources analyzed and dismissed from further analysis due to low likelihood of impacts include air quality, recreation, human health and safety, and visual resources. The environmental consequences analysis evaluates the potential impacts that may occur to each resource area because of the proposed project. Impacts to resource areas can be adverse or beneficial and can vary in magnitude or how noticeable the change is. Duration, or how long impacts will persist after project completion, and extent, or the geographic area in which effects would take place. The no action alternative provides a baseline for comparison of impacts to each resource area with and without project implementation. For each of the 12 resource areas analyzed in the draft DA, this slide provides a summary of the potential effects under the proposed action and the no action alternative. Resource areas may experience both beneficial and adverse effects under the alternatives. Beneficial effects are shown in green. For resources experiencing a range of adverse effects, the most severe adverse effect is presented. For example, adverse effects experienced by soil resources range from minor to moderate under the proposed action. However, only the moderate effect is represented here. Today's discussion will focus only on select resources, those that have the potential to experience greater impacts compared to other resource areas. The next slide will focus on the measures that GSA would implement to reduce the level of impact. For a complete discussion of all resource areas and the potential impacts to them from the proposed alternatives, please refer to the draft DA. Let's start with geology, topography, and soils. Under the proposed action, there would be moderate effects to geology due to excavation of bedrock and well installation, and moderate effects on topography from grading and leveling activities. There would be minor to moderate effects on soils from vegetation clearing, erosion, and covering of soils with 11 additional acres of impervious surfaces. Under the no action alternative, there would be no effects to geology and topography, but negligible effects to soils from regular maintenance activities. Next up is water resources. Under the proposed action, there could be minor effects to surface waters due to potential sediment or contaminant runoff and accidental spills during construction, and for regular maintenance activities and increased runoff post-construction. The proposed action would result in minor to moderate impacts to Vermont Class II wetlands and vernal pools, including a permanent filling of a 1.223 acre Class II wetland. There would be minor effects to groundwater from infiltration of contaminants from construction and reduced groundwater recharge from increased impervious surfaces post-construction. Under the no action alternative, there would be negligible effects to neighboring surface waters due to continued reductions in water quality from stormwater runoff. As for biological resources, construction activities under the proposed action would result in moderate effects to vegetation due to the destruction and removal of native plant species and associated habitat. There would be minor effects to wildlife from the removal of available habitat and disturbances from noise and activity during construction and operation of the expanded port. 2 federally listed species, the tricolored bat and the northern long-eared bat, have been detected within 3 miles of the project area and have the potential to occur in the project area. There is no designated critical habitat for these species in or near the project area. The project may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect, the bats. GSA is undergoing informal Section 7 consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under the Endangered Species Act, as well as coordinating with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources to ensure minimal impacts to federal and state listed species. Section 7 consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recently concluded with the agency concurring with GSA's determination of effects on the bat species. The mitigation measures recommended by the Fish and Wildlife Service, discussed on the next slide, will be implemented during the project. Under the no action alternative, there would be minor effects to biological resources due to noise and other disturbance to wildlife from operations and routine maintenance activities occurring at the existing port. Next, we have solid and hazardous waste and materials. Under the proposed action, negligible effects to solid hazardous waste and materials management may result from accidental spills of hazardous materials, such as fuel and other chemicals. Moderate effects may result from the disposal of hazardous materials, such as asbestos-containing materials, generation of construction and demolition waste, and the potential for contaminant runoff of waste or from waste stockpiles. In the long term, effects from the proposed action would be negligible to minor in magnitude. There may be accidental spills or leaks of hazardous materials from vehicles crossing the port. In addition to waste generated from regular maintenance, the training building would generate ammunition waste. Under the no action alternative, the continued use of hazardous materials and the generation of solid and hazardous waste at the LPOE would have minor effects. There may be greater quantities of waste generated due to the projected increase in traffic and visitors at the LPOE after completion of 835. Finally, we will discuss the potential effects to cultural resources. GSA conducted a survey in 2023 to identify the archaeological resources and historic properties occurring on the LPOE property and the properties proposed for acquisition. The survey concluded that the project area has high sensitivity for archaeological resources and recommended that a more extensive survey be conducted to identify such resources. The results of this survey were shared with the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation, which concurred with the findings and recommendations of the report. Further archaeological investigations are currently ongoing for the project area. If found, the proposed action may result in moderate effects to such resources. The survey did not identify any historic properties in the project area, and as such, there would be no effects to historic properties or critical view sheds under the proposed action. Under the no action alternative, there would be no effects on archaeological resources and historic properties. To avoid or minimize impacts to the resource areas just discussed, GSA would implement a suite of best management practices, BMPs, or mitigation measures specific to each resource. For geology, topography, and soils, BMPs include using silt fencing, sediment traps, and installing gravel construction entrances and exits. Areas temporarily cleared of vegetation during staging would be revegetated with regionally appropriate native plant species. Grading would be carried out such that the existing site hydrology is maintained. Best available boring techniques would be used to install new wells to avoid causing effects to the bedrock. To protect water resources, BMPs would be implemented in accordance with the Vermont Construction General Permit, and a stormwater pollution prevention plan would be developed to document the BMPs to be used on the construction site, such as erosion control strategies, proper chemical storage, and immediate cleanup of spills. Additionally, GSA would obtain an individual state wetland permit prior to project implementation and implement mitigation measures as required by the state of Vermont to minimize effects to wetlands. These may include establishing new wetlands or payment of fees to a mitigation bank. BMPs to minimize impacts to biological resources may include the use of existing roadways and disturbed area for construction and staging, observing maximum speed limits, and implementing time of year restrictions for the protection of bat species. To minimize effects from solid and hazardous waste, GSA would implement measures such as frequent removal of waste stockpiles, use of licensed contractors for tank removal and disposal of hazardous waste, implementation of a spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plan, and separate storage and disposal of ammunition waste. As stated earlier in the presentation, GSA is conducting Section 106 consultation with the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation concurrently with this draft DA. Archaeological resources investigation for this project is ongoing, and based on survey results, GSA will coordinate with the agency to develop appropriate mitigation measures. In addition, GSA contractors will be provided with an inadvertent discovery plan for cultural resources and human remains, which shall be implemented if such materials are uncovered during construction. GSA is soliciting comments on the draft DA and will consider all substantive comments received during the development of the final EA. The last day to submit public comments on the draft EA is November 19, 2024. As you can see, NEPA falls under the project planning and development phase. We are estimating to complete the NEPA process in early 2025. Subsequently, the architectural engineering firm, AE firm, selected by GSA will conclude the design phase. Demolition of structures on the private property acquired by GSA and initial site work is anticipated to occur in 2025. Construction is projected to begin in 2026 and would be completed by 2028, following which the new port will be fully occupied. These are estimated timeframes that are subject to change. GSA would provide updates via the GSA website. With that, we will now begin the public comment session.
Thank you, Leon. As Leon noted, at this point we're going to move into the public comment section. But before we do, a quick reminder on ways that you can tell us what you think. As Leon mentioned, written comments may be provided at any time during the public comment period, which began on October 16th and must be submitted or postmarked by November 19th using one of the following methods. You can submit comments in writing tonight. There are forms in the back. You can send an email to highgatesprings.lpoe@gsa.gov and reference Highgate Springs LPOE EA in the subject line. Or you can send written comments to the following address: U.S. General Services Administration, attention John Maurer, M-A-U-R-E-R, Project Manager, at the Thomas P. O'Neill Jr. Federal Building, 10 Causeway Street, 11th floor, Boston, Mass. 0222-1077. Also, hard copies of the draft environmental assessment are available for review at the St. Albans Free Library at 11 Maiden Lane, in St. Albans, and at the St. Albans City Hall at 100 North Main Street in St. Albans. In a few days, Project information, including a video recording of the public meeting, will be available at gsa.gov/Highgate Springs. Give us a few days on that one. Now we're going to move on to your comments. For those of you that signed up, I don't have that list, so there's only a few of you here, so I'm not going to get too wrapped up about who signed up. But just remember, once you are called, step up to the microphone. Say and spell your first and last name at the start of your comment. We're recording all of these. Your comments become part of the record, so we need that information. Be respectful of participants and presenters. Remain quiet while others are speaking. Verbal comments will be held to a 3-minute time limit. If time allows, participants may be permitted to speak again after all commenters have had the opportunity to speak. Again, additional comments can also be submitted in writing, and that recording will be made available, and your comments will be included in the administrative record. If you signed up to speak, do we have a speakers list?
We do. That was a placeholder for Carrie Johnson, if she'd like to speak.
All right, so if you've signed up, please come on up, state your full name, and we'll go from there.
It's very brief. Carrie Johnson, I'm the current Highgate Town Administrator. So I'm here on behalf of Highgate, which is very exciting to see this change. My question actually is more logistical. Many in Highgate and this whole county would like to know if you have an estimate for when A35 would actually be open. This project is scheduled to not be done until 2028. So that was my only question instead of a comment. And I'm sorry, I didn't follow your directions. Carrie Johnson, C-A-R-R-I-E. Johnson, J-O-H-N-S-O-N.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. So I would, for Auto Route 35, since that is a Canadian project, they're the ones who are going to be providing updates on that. I will say that we do have a monthly coordination meeting with CDSA, which is Canadian Custom Group, as well as the Vermont Department of Transportation, where we do discuss coordination issues. However, I personally don't have an update on the A35 project.
But to Christina's point, since we have that monthly meeting, we can ask if there's an update on A35 at the next monthly meeting.
That's right.
Thank you.
Others? Sir, please step forward.
My name is Tim Smith, T-I-M-S-M-I-T-H. It's more of a clarifying question. I thought at one of the earlier meetings that you had, are you looking for comments and no questions, or can we ask questions?
You can ask. We may not necessarily be able to answer them at this point, but you can definitely ask.
Okay. So I will, can you clarify? I think I heard that no existing building would be torn down. I thought that was in the comments.
Under the
No.
proposed action.
Under the proposed action, the existing port buildings will be demolished.
It will be moved.
All of them, I think, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
All of them at the facility. There are a number of buildings there.
So how will traffic, have you coordinated the traffic flow, and how does that work during that process?
Yeah, so construction will be phased, so the buildings won't be demolished all at the same time. So new buildings will be constructed prior to the old ones being demolished.
And are you expecting delays with traffic? Do you know that?
I don't know at this time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Wow, presentation was that clear.
Yes.
Well, if there are no further questions, we'll stick around if you want to take a look at the charts, but thank you for coming tonight. Please keep in mind we are not quite at square one of a long and complex process, but we're still relatively early in a long and complex process. So go to that website, gsa.gov/Highgate Springs. Do it regularly, and that's where we'll put updates. We'll put out press releases. We'll be on social media. Thank you for your time.